the throne room of the Zethari Empire, was built to make anyone feel small. Its towering black walls hummed with strange energy, glowing with alien symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. Rows of insectoid guards stood perfectly still, their armor shining like obsidian, their razor-tipped spears aimed toward the center of the room, toward him. Captain Eli Graves walked between them without a single weapon. No armor, no escort. Just his navy blue Terran fleet jacket, a disarming smile, and a ridiculous amount of confidence. Every step echoed in the cavernous hall, but he didn't slow down. If anything, he whistled. It wasn't bravado, or maybe it was, but he had learned long ago that fear never helped, and charm, on the other hand, could get you out of the strangest situations. At the far end of the room sat Queen Tyrell of Zethar, ruler of 1,000 worlds, destroyer of fleets, and self-declared scourge of humanity. She was magnificent, 7 feet tall, with smooth silver-blue skin that shimmered under the light, 4 slender arms adorned with ancient gold, and a long crown of black crystal that rose like horns from her brow. Her eyes, molten gold with slitted pupils, watched him with the cold patience of a predator. When Eli stopped at the base of the steps, the queen rose from her throne. "So," she said, her voice smooth and sharp at once, "this is the human who dares stand before me." "Captain Eli Graves at your service," he said with a small bow. "Pleased to meet you, your majesty." Her head tilted slightly. "Do you have any last words before I vaporize you?" The guards shifted, some hissed. Eli's smile didn't falter. "Yeah," he said, "nice place you've got here. Little dark though, maybe try a skylight." A ripple of shock went through the room. No one joked with the Queen of Zethar. And yet, instead of ordering his head removed, Tyrell's lips curved into something almost resembling amusement. "Humans," she said slowly, "always hiding fear behind humor." "Who says I'm afraid?" he asked. "Honestly, this is the nicest death threat I've had all week." Her golden eyes narrowed. "Do you not understand the situation you are in, Terran? I could order your execution with a thought. Your blood would stain my floor before you even screamed." Eli shrugged. "You could, but then you'd never know what I came to say." "And what have you come to say, human?" she asked, stepping closer, her 4 hands folding behind her back. "A plea for mercy, a surrender, a joke to amuse me before you die." "I came," he said, looking right into her eyes, "to ask you to dinner." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the hum of the throne room seemed to pause. Then unexpectedly Queen Tyrell laughed. It was a low, melodic sound, rich and strange like wind chimes in a storm. The guards glanced at one another nervously. Their queen never laughed. "You are either very brave," she said finally, "or very, very foolish." "Why not both?" Eli offered, flashing that same easy grin. She stared at him for a long time, circling slowly, studying every inch of this small, unarmored, audacious human. His heart thudded, but he didn't back down. That was the trick: never show fear, never blink. And deep down, he wasn't bluffing. He wasn't afraid, not of her, not even of death. "Tell me, Captain Graves," she said, stopping just behind him. "Do you think you are special? That you, one insignificant human, can charm a queen who commands armies?" "I don't know about special," he replied, turning slightly to face her. "But I think even queens get bored, and I think sometimes the scariest person in the galaxy might want someone to talk to." Her gaze softened just a fraction before it sharpened again. "You are bold, too bold." "It's kind of our thing," he said. "Humans. We do stupid, impossible things, and sometimes they work." Another pause, and then she stepped even closer, so close he could feel the warmth of her breath on his cheek. "Careful, human," she whispered. "Your courage might make me like you." "Would that be such a bad thing?" he asked. "It would be dangerous." He grinned. "I like dangerous." Tyrell's eyes lingered on his face, searching for something: weakness, fear, a crack in the mask. But there was none. Only that maddening smile, that reckless calm. And for the first time in centuries, something unfamiliar tugged at the edges of her carefully forged heart. Curiosity, and something else she dared not name. Finally, she stepped back and raised one elegant hand. "Very well, Captain Graves. You have intrigued me. You will not die today." "Oh, good," Eli said lightly. "I was hoping to stick around for dessert." The Queen's lips curved again, not quite a smile, but not far from one. "Do not grow too comfortable. Your life is still mine to take." "Then I guess I'll have to make it worth keeping," he said, his voice soft but sure. And in that vast, alien throne room, a strange thing happened. Two enemies destined for war stood only a breath apart, and the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. It was the beginning of something neither of them could predict. Something that could save worlds or break them. But for now it was just a smile and the spark of something dangerous, impossible, and maybe, just maybe, love. The first meeting had ended without bloodshed, which, by Zethari standards, was a miracle. No plasma bolts, no executions, just a dangerously curious queen and a human who wouldn't stop smiling. 3 days later, Captain Eli Graves was invited back to the palace. Officially, it was for further diplomatic discussion. Unofficially, it was because Queen Tyrell couldn't stop thinking about him. He annoyed her. He confused her. And worst of all, he intrigued her. She paced across her private chamber before the meeting, 4 hands clasped behind her back. The last human emissary had begged for mercy. This one joked about skylights. It made no sense, and Tyrell hated what she didn't understand. "Perhaps it is a trick," she muttered to herself, "a weapon in the form of a smile." The door hissed open, and there he was again, walking in as if he owned the place, hands tucked casually into his jacket pockets. "Your Majesty," he said with a grin, bowing just enough to be polite but not submissive. "Lovely day for a peace talk." She eyed him suspiciously. "Do all humans act like fools in front of death?" "Only the charming ones," he said, "and the truly stupid." "Which are you?" He shrugged. "Bit of both, I guess." Tyrell's lips twitched, almost a smile, almost. "Sit, human, and speak quickly before I change my mind." They sat across from each other at a low crystalline table, the air between them heavy with unspoken tension. Outside, the twin moons of Zethar drifted lazily in a violet sky. Inside, two very different species tried to figure each other out. "So," Eli began, leaning forward, "here, the thing, you don't actually want a war." Her golden eyes narrowed. "Do not presume to tell me what I want." "I'm not presuming," he said calmly. "I'm observing. You're too smart to waste resources on conquering Earth. We're annoying, sure, but we're stubborn as hell. Even if you won, it would cost you more than it's worth." Tyrell's gaze flickered just slightly. "And you think your planet can stop us?" "Nope," he said cheerfully, "but I think we'd make it very inconvenient." Silence stretched between them, but there was no anger in her expression, only thought. Finally she asked, "If not war, then what do you propose?" "Partnership," Eli said. "Trade, science, exploration. We've got things you don't. You've got things we don't. Together we could do something amazing." "Together," she repeated the word like it was foreign on her tongue. "You speak as if we are equals." "Aren't we?" he asked. Her brows lifted. "Your species is barely capable of crossing your own galaxy." "True, but we're fast learners, and we're good at making friends," he smiled, "even scary ones." Her jaw tightened, not in anger but in the strange, unfamiliar tug of amusement. "You are insufferable." "Thank you." She stared at him for a long moment, then rose from her seat and began packing slowly around him, her long robe trailing behind her like liquid starlight. "You want peace," she said, "but your government sends soldiers. Your fleets gather at the edge of our borders. Your leaders speak of fear and defense." "Yeah," Eli admitted, "because they don't know you like I do." Her head snapped toward him, And what do you think you know of me, human? I know you're not a monster, he said softly. I know you're strong and proud and maybe a little lonely. And I know that deep down you don't want to burn worlds. You want to build something that lasts. The queen's breath caught just slightly before she turned away, as if hiding something from him. You speak boldly, she said. It's the only way I know how. A quiet fell between them. Outside, distant ships crossed the sky like silver birds. Inside, two hearts, one human, one alien, beat a little too fast. Finally, Tyrell spoke again. What you ask is not simple. My people distrust humans. They see you as unpredictable, dangerous. They're not wrong, Eli said with a chuckle. We are unpredictable and dangerous, but we're also loyal and stubborn. And when we care about something or someone, we fight like hell to protect it. Her golden eyes softened just a little at that. And what is it that you care about, Captain Graves? He hesitated for a heartbeat, then said the truth. Right now, this conversation. Tyrell froze not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. Sincere, gentle, no games, no politics, just truth. No one had spoken to her like that in decades. For a moment, she felt something she had long forgotten, a small, dangerous warmth in her chest. You are a strange creature, she whispered. I get that a lot. You should be afraid of me. Maybe I am, he said, but maybe I'm also curious. Curious, she echoed. About what happens next. She turned back toward him, her expression unreadable. What happens next, she said, is that I will consider your proposal, nothing more. Good enough for me, he said, rising from his seat. I've always liked a good maybe. And if my answer is no, she asked, her voice suddenly sharp. He flashed her a grin. Then I'll come back tomorrow and try again. Her composure cracked just slightly, and she let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. You really are impossible, she said. Impossible, he replied, is kind of our specialty. When Eli left the chamber, Queen Tyrell stood by the window, staring out at the stars. For the first time since she took the throne, the future didn't feel like a chain of battles and victories. It felt uncertain, messy, complicated, and strangely exciting. She touched her chest lightly, where her heart still beat a little too fast. Curious, she whispered to herself, very curious. The weeks after their second meeting were anything but peaceful. Captain Eli Graves found himself summoned to the palace more often than he'd expected, sometimes for official negotiations, sometimes for long, wandering conversations under alien stars. Queen Tyrell still called him foolish and reckless, but now she said it with a faint spark in her golden eyes. He liked that spark. He liked her, too, more than he wanted to admit. But while they talked and teased and dreamed about peace, the rest of the galaxy was sharpening its knives. It started with the protests. Tyrell's council chambers erupted with fury when word spread that their queen was entertaining a human peace envoy. Powerful generals called her weak. Merchants threatened rebellion. Some even whispered of overthrow. You have divided my empire, Tyrell hissed during one late-night meeting. They call me traitor. Yeah, well, they call me worse back home, Eli said with a crooked smile. Alien sympathizer, betrayer of Earth. My own people want me court-martialed. You still smile. Of course, if I stop smiling, they win. She stared at him then, something complicated and unspoken flickering across her face. You are a strange man, Captain Graves. And you, he replied softly, are the strangest reason I've ever wanted to save a planet. But not everyone wanted saving. 2 nights later, an explosion rocked the lower palace. Screams echoed through the halls as alarms blared. Eli, who had been reviewing treaty drafts in his guest quarters, was thrown to the floor by the blast wave. Guards, shouted a voice in Zethari, protect the queen. Eli staggered to his feet, heart racing, and sprinted toward the throne room. Smoke filled the corridors, and panicked citizens ran past him. Somewhere ahead, he heard the distinctive hiss of plasma fire. He found Tyrell surrounded by her royal guard, deflecting bolts of blue light with a shield field, her 4 hands moving with deadly precision. Rebel soldiers, her own soldiers, were storming the chamber. "Get back, human," one of her guards barked. "Not a chance," Eli shouted, diving behind a shattered pillar. He snatched up a fallen blaster, heavy, unfamiliar but functional, and started returning fire. His aim wasn't perfect, but he didn't care. All that mattered was keeping her alive. "Captain," Tyrell called over the chaos, "why are you here?" "Because I don't have anywhere else to be," he yelled back. They fought side by side, the unlikeliest of allies, a queen and a Terran soldier, moving like they had trained together for years. Eli covered her flank. She shielded him with her energy field. And somewhere between the fire and the smoke, they locked eyes, a fleeting look that said more than any treaty ever could. When the last rebel fell, silence returned to the throne room. The floor was scorched, the walls shattered, but they were alive. Tyrell turned to him, her breathing uneven. "You risked your life for me." He wiped soot from his face and grinned. "Wouldn't be the first time I did something stupid." "This was not stupid," she said quietly. "This was brave." He stepped closer, close enough to see the faint tremble in her hands. "I told you before, you're not my enemy." Her golden eyes searched his face, as if trying to understand a language she'd never spoken before. "Why? Why do you care so much about a queen who once threatened your world?" "Because I see you," he said. "Not the throne, not the army, you, and I think maybe you're worth saving." Something in her heart cracked open then, something that had been sealed away behind duty and fear. She reached out with one trembling hand and touched his cheek, the gesture hesitant, almost reverent. "No one has ever spoken to me like that," she whispered. "Then they've been missing out." The rebellion was crushed, but the damage was done. Trust within her empire was shattered. Earth's government, terrified by the news, demanded Eli's immediate return. "You're making this worse," his commander told him through the comms. "They're trying to kill her now. They might try to kill you." "Then let them," Eli replied. "I'm not leaving." "Graves, this isn't a love story." "No," he said, glancing out the window at the Zethari city lights. "It's bigger than that." That night, under the glow of the twin moons, Eli and Tyrell walked through the royal gardens. The flowers glowed with soft, shifting light, and the air smelled of rain and strange spices. "I should order you to leave," she said, not meeting his eyes. "It would be safer for you." "I don't do safe." "You are infuriating." "And yet here we are." She sighed, but there was no anger in it, only something softer. "You could die here." "I could die anywhere," he said. "But if I die trying to make peace, that's a life worth living." They stopped at the edge of a small lake. The water reflected the stars like 1,000 tiny lanterns. She turned to face him, closer now than she had ever been. "Humans," she whispered almost to herself. "So fragile, so reckless, and yet so hard to hate." "Careful," he said with a teasing smile. That almost sounded like a compliment. Perhaps it was. They stood there for a long time, not as enemies, not even as diplomats, just as two souls from different worlds, drawn together by something neither of them fully understood. And for the first time since the war began, Queen Tyrell dared to imagine a future where peace wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. The weeks that followed were far from peaceful. Every conversation between Captain Eli Graves and Queen Tyrell seemed to shift the universe just a little. Their meetings started as tense diplomatic exchanges, but quickly grew into something more unpredictable, playful arguments, long talks under the twin moons, and moments of silence that said more than words ever could. The galaxy, however, didn't care about their growing bond. Rumors spread through both worlds like wildfire. On Earth, politicians accused Eli of treason. On Zethar, generals whispered that their queen was losing her strength. and in the shadows not everyone wanted peace. The trouble began during a council meeting. Tyrell stood at the head of the great chamber, her golden eyes blazing with authority. Around her, 12 of the most powerful Zethari leaders hissed and clicked in disapproval. "You cannot trust them," snarled General Kriv, his armored tail thrashing against the marble floor. "Humans are dangerous. They destroy everything they touch." "And yet," Tyrell replied calmly, "they also build, they create, they hope." "Hope will not save our empire," spat another. "The human must leave before he poisons your judgment." Eli stood at the far end of the chamber, arms folded, trying not to look bored. "You know," he said lightly, "I can hear you." Every eye turned to him, some furious, some disgusted, but Tyrell only sighed. "Captain Graves," she said, "perhaps you should." "Leave, not a chance," he interrupted. "I came here to help stop a war, and like it or not, we're in this together now." The room erupted in angry hisses. Kriv stepped forward, his voice rising. "You dare speak as if you are her equal." "No," Eli said calmly. "I speak as if we're partners." It was bold, too bold. And yet as Tyrell looked at him, something warm flickered in her chest, pride maybe, or something deeper. "Enough," she said firmly. "The council will deliberate. You are dismissed." That night the palace was quiet, too quiet. Eli was lying on the balcony of his quarters, staring up at the alien constellations, when the first explosion shook the air. The walls trembled, and distant screams echoed through the corridors. "Not good," he muttered, grabbing his jacket. He sprinted down the hall toward the throne room. Smoke billowed from shattered walls, and the once pristine corridors were littered with debris. Armed rebels, Zethari soldiers loyal to no one but themselves, were storming the palace. "Protect the queen," someone shouted. Eli didn't hesitate. He snatched a fallen blaster from the ground and dove into the chaos. The throne room was a storm of light and noise. Plasma bolts tore through the air, shattering pillars and scorching walls. Tyrell stood at the center, her personal guard forming a protective circle around her. She held a crackling spear of pure energy, the weapon of a queen, and every strike she made was precise and deadly. "Graves," she shouted when she saw him, "you should not be here." "Too late," he yelled back, ducking behind a pillar as a bolt zipped past his ear. "You need backup. This is not your fight." "Yeah, well, I'm making it my fight." They fell into a rhythm without meaning to her, striking with deadly grace, him covering her flanks with human recklessness. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but he was unpredictable, and that kept them both alive. At one point, a rebel broke through the guard line, lunging for the queen with a plasma blade. Eli didn't think. He threw himself between them, tackling the attacker to the ground. They rolled across the marble floor until Eli managed to blast the weapon from the rebel's hands. "Are you trying to die?" Tyrell shouted, pulling him to his feet. "Not today," he said with a grin. When the last rebel fell and silence returned, the throne room was unrecognizable, scorched walls, shattered crystal, bodies everywhere. Tyrell stood in the center of it all, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. And then, slowly, she turned to him. "You could have died," she said softly. "Yeah," he replied, wiping soot from his cheek. "But then who would make bad jokes in your meetings?" "This is no time for jokes," she said, though her voice trembled. "It's the perfect time for jokes," he said gently, "because we're still alive." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Tyrell stepped closer, too close. Her golden eyes searched his, and in them, Eli saw something raw and unguarded. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk your life for me?" "Because I care," he said simply. "About you, about peace, about what we could build." Her breath caught a tiny, involuntary sound, and for once, the queen who had faced armies without flinching found herself lost for words. "You are a fool," she said finally. "Maybe," he replied, "but I'm your fool." The rebellion was crushed, but the danger wasn't over. Both Earth and Zethar demanded answers. Trust was breaking. Alliances were fragile. And yet, as the night grew quiet and the palace burned under distant stars, Tyrell and Eli stood together on the balcony, shoulder to shoulder. "You should leave," she murmured. "It will only get more dangerous." "I've never been good at leaving," he said, "especially when I've found something worth staying for." She turned her head slowly toward him, her expression unreadable. "And what, Captain Graves, have you found here?" He met her gaze, steady and sure. "You." The stars reflected in her golden eyes. She said nothing, not yet, but she didn't pull away either. And in that silence, a new understanding formed. It wasn't a treaty, it wasn't a surrender. It was something stronger, a fragile, stubborn bond between two souls who should have been enemies, but weren't. The palace had been rebuilt in silence. Days had passed since the rebellion, and the scars of battle still clung to the walls, scorch marks on the marble, shattered windows replaced but not forgotten. Yet the empire was quieter now, stronger, perhaps even more united. And somewhere within that silence, something else had begun to grow, something softer, warmer, and far more dangerous than war. It was happening between Captain Eli Graves and Queen Tyrell. Neither of them spoke about it. Neither dared to. But it was there in every glance, every shared smile, every moment that lasted a second too long. It was in the way her voice softened when she said his name, and in the way his heart raced whenever she looked his way. They met in the royal gardens that evening, a place few were allowed to see. Glowing plants shimmered under the twin moons, and crystal flowers bloomed with light instead of petals. The air smelled of spices and rain, and somewhere in the distance, alien birds sang songs from another world. Eli arrived first, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He still wore the same jacket he'd brought from Earth, though it now had a scorch mark from the palace battle, a mark he refused to fix. When Tyrell appeared, she wasn't wearing her crown. Her royal armor had been replaced with a simple flowing gown, pale silver and soft as starlight. For the first time, she looked less like a queen and more like someone human. "Captain," she greeted, her voice quieter than usual. "Your Majesty," he said with a teasing bow, "or should I say Tyrell?" Her lips curved. "You are still bold. Still alive, too, that's progress." They walked side by side through the glowing garden paths, the silence between them filled with unspoken things. "You risked everything during the attack," she said finally, eyes fixed ahead. "Your life, your mission, even your future." Eli shrugged. "I didn't think about any of that." "You should have." "Probably, but I don't really do should." She stopped and turned to him, her golden eyes intense. "Why? Why would a man from a world I once threatened risk his life for me?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and smiled softly. "Because I see more than a queen. I see someone trying to do the right thing, someone who's lonely, someone who deserves a chance." The words hit deeper than he knew. Tyrell's chest felt tight, her breath caught in a way it never had in battle. No enemy had ever disarmed her like this, with kindness, with honesty. "Lonely," she repeated, almost to herself. "It is not a word often used to describe a queen." "Maybe that's the problem," he said gently. "No one sees you. They see the crown, the power, the fear, but I see you, Tyrell." She looked away, as if the words were too heavy to meet head-on. "I have spent my life being feared. It is how one survives as a ruler." "Fear works," Eli said, "but it's not the same as being loved." Her head snapped back toward him. "Loved." "Not just romantically," he clarified quickly, though his cheeks warmed. "I mean trust, respect, real connection. People don't follow someone just because they're scared. They follow someone they believe in." "And you believe in me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do," he said, "more than I probably should." They reached a small lake in the center of the garden. Its surface shimmered with starlight, and strange silver fish darted beneath the water. Tyrell knelt by the edge and touched the surface gently, sending ripples across the stillness. "When I was a child," she said quietly, "I dreamed of peace. My mother told me it was weakness. That power was the only language the galaxy understood. I believed her. I became that power." "And now?" Eli asked. "Now," she sighed, watching the ripples fade, "now I am not so certain." Eli crouched beside her, close enough for his shoulder to brush hers. "It's not weakness to want peace. It's strength. And it's not too late, you know. For peace. For you." She turned toward him. Their faces were close now, too close. Her golden eyes met his and something in her chest trembled. She had commanded armies, conquered worlds, crushed rebellions. But this warmth that bloomed in her heart terrified her more than any war. "Humans," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. "So fragile, so reckless. And yet you make me question everything I thought I knew." "Good," he said softly. "You make me question everything too." Silence stretched between them. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy, full, charged like the air before a storm. And then, without meaning to, without planning it, she reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm against his, delicate, hesitant, and when he didn't pull away, her breath caught. "Is this acceptable?" she asked, a little unsure. "More than acceptable," he murmured. They stayed like that, hand in hand, hearts beating too fast as the moons climbed higher into the sky. Time seemed to slow, the galaxy fatting around them until there was only this moment, this impossible connection between a human and an alien queen. And in that fragile stillness, something changed. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a kiss. It was something quieter and deeper, a shared truth neither of them could deny anymore. They were no longer just enemies. No longer just allies. They were something more. When they finally rose and walked back through the glowing gardens, neither spoke. They didn't need to. Every glance, every small smile, every brush of fingers said more than words ever could. And though both of them knew darker days were coming, more threats, more battles, more impossible choices, they also knew something else. Whatever happened next, they wouldn't be facing it alone. The night after they held hands in the garden, the galaxy seemed quieter, as if the stars themselves were waiting to see what would happen next. But peace, like love, is fragile, and both were about to be tested. Eli woke before dawn to the sound of alarms. The palace lights flashed crimson, and the floor beneath him vibrated with the distant rumble of ships leaving orbit. He grabbed his jacket and rushed into the corridor, his heart pounding. "Tyrell," he shouted, sprinting toward the throne chamber. He found her already there, armored and commanding, 4 hands working swiftly as holographic maps floated in the air before her. The soft, warm queen from the garden was gone. In her place stood the fierce ruler of the Zethari Empire. "What's happening?" he demanded. Her golden eyes flicked toward him, hard and distant. "There has been an attack. On the palace. On Earth." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What?" "A rogue fleet, Zethari warships, entered Terran space during the night. They destroyed 2 defense stations before they were stopped." "Please tell me you're not saying." "It was not my order," she interrupted sharply. "But my generals acted without permission. They believe war is inevitable and that you are the reason for our weakness." Eli stepped back, his chest tightening. "They're blaming me." "They see our connection as dangerous," she said, her voice softer now. "They believe you have clouded my judgment. And Earth," his voice cracked slightly, "they must think you betrayed us. They have already demanded your return." Hours later, the situation had worsened. Human fleets were mobilizing. The Zethari Council was calling for war. The fragile bridge Eli and Tyrell had built was crumbling under fear and anger. In the middle of it all, they stood in the royal chambers, 2 people who should have hated each other, bound by something neither fully understood. "I have to go back," Eli said finally, breaking the silence. Tyrell's eyes widened. What? If I stay, they'll think I've betrayed Earth. Maybe they'll even attack before we can stop them. And if you go, my people will think I've surrendered to human demands, she countered. They will revolt. They may even kill me. Then we're out of options, he said. This was doomed from the start. Her jaw tightened. Do you truly believe that? He looked at her, really looked, and his chest ached. No, he whispered, but it's starting to feel like the universe does. That night the palace was silent again, but it wasn't peace. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a storm waiting to break. Eli stood on the balcony, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, home, family, everything he'd sworn to protect. But somewhere closer, inside these palace walls, was something he didn't want to lose. Tyrell, he said softly when she joined him. Eli, she answered, her voice just as quiet. They stood side by side without speaking for a long time. The air was cool, and the twin moons cast pale light across the gardens where they'd once shared something unspoken and beautiful. Now, it felt like that moment belonged to another lifetime. What do we do? He asked finally. I do not know, she admitted. I am a queen, and yet I feel powerless. He smiled faintly. Welcome to being human. She let out a soft laugh, short and sad. I'm starting to think it is contagious. Their laughter faded into silence. Then she turned to face him, her golden eyes burning with emotion. I do not want you to leave. I don't want to leave either. But you must, she whispered, for your people, for peace. He swallowed hard. And what about us? Her breath caught. Us. Don't pretend you don't feel it too, he said. I know you do. She closed her eyes, her hands trembling. I feel it, she admitted, more than I wish I did. Then say it, he urged. Say something real before I go. The air between them felt charged, alive. And then, finally, she whispered the words neither of them had dared to say. I care for you, Eli Graves. It was not a declaration of love, not yet, but it was enough to make his chest ache and his knees feel weak. He stepped closer, his voice low. I care for you too, more than I've ever cared for anything. Her breath trembled. Then go, before I change my mind and keep you here forever. The next morning, Eli stood at the palace gates, ready to board a Terran shuttle that would take him back to Earth. His heart felt heavier than it ever had in his life. Tyrell stood before him in full ceremonial armor, her crown gleaming like the sun, but her eyes betrayed everything her face tried to hide. Will I see you again? She asked quietly. You'd better, he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. I've still got to convince the galaxy you're not a terrifying monster. And I must convince my people you are not a reckless fool. Good luck with that. Good luck with yours. They stood there for one last heartbeat, two people from two worlds, held together by a connection neither language nor logic could explain. And then, slowly, she reached out and touched his cheek. Do not die, Captain Graves, she whispered. Not until I see you again. I'll do my best. And then he was gone, the man who had made her laugh, who had challenged her, who had taught her how to feel again. That night Queen Tyrell stood alone in the garden where they had once walked hand in hand. The flowers still glowed softly. The water still shimmered. But everything felt different now, emptier, colder. Far above, human and Zethari ships moved into position, preparing for a war that neither of them wanted. And in the middle of that looming storm, two hearts ached across the stars, still bound by a fragile, impossible hope. And though they were apart, one truth remained. It was not the end. Not yet. The night after they held hands in the garden, the galaxy seemed quieter, as if the stars themselves were waiting to see what would happen next. But peace, like love, is fragile, and both were about to be tested. Eli woke before dawn to the sound of alarms. The palace lights flashed crimson, and the floor beneath him vibrated with the distant rumble of ships leaving orbit. He grabbed his jacket and rushed into the corridor, his heart pounding. Tyrell, he shouted, sprinting toward the throne chamber. He found her already there, armored and commanding, 4 hands working swiftly as holographic maps floated in the air before her. The soft, warm queen from the garden was gone. In her place stood the fierce ruler of the Zethari Empire. "What's happening?" he demanded. Her golden eyes flicked toward him, hard and distant. "There has been an attack. On the palace. On Earth." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What?" "A rogue fleet, Zethari warships, entered Terran space during the night. They destroyed 2 defense stations before they were stopped." "Please tell me you're not saying—" "It was not my order," she interrupted sharply. "But my generals acted without permission. They believe war is inevitable, and that you are the reason for our weakness." Eli stepped back, his chest tightening. "They're blaming me." "They see our connection as dangerous," she said, her voice softer now. "They believe you have clouded my judgment. And Earth," his voice cracked slightly, "they must think you betrayed us. They have already demanded your return." Hours later, the situation had worsened. Human fleets were mobilizing. The Zethari Council was calling for war. The fragile bridge Eli and Tyrell had built was crumbling under fear and anger. In the middle of it all, they stood in the royal chambers, 2 people who should have hated each other, bound by something neither fully understood. "I have to go back," Eli said, finally breaking the silence. Tyrell's eyes widened. "What?" "If I stay, they'll think I've betrayed Earth. Maybe they'll even attack before we can stop them. And if you go, my people will think I've surrendered to human demands," she countered. "They will revolt. They may even kill me." "Then we're out of options," he said. "This was doomed from the start." Her jaw tightened. "Do you truly believe that?" He looked at her, really looked, and his chest ached. "No," he whispered, "but it's starting to feel like the universe does." That night the palace was silent again, but it wasn't peace. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a storm waiting to break. Eli stood on the balcony, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, home, family, everything he'd sworn to protect. But somewhere closer, inside these palace walls, was something he didn't want to lose. "Tyrell," he said softly when she joined him. "Eli," she answered, her voice just as quiet. They stood side by side without speaking for a long time. The air was cool, and the twin moons cast pale light across the gardens where they'd once shared something unspoken and beautiful. Now, it felt like that moment belonged to another lifetime. "What do we do?" he asked finally. "I do not know," she admitted. "I am a queen, and yet I feel powerless." He smiled faintly. "Welcome to being human." She let out a soft laugh, short and sad. "I am starting to think it is contagious." Their laughter faded into silence. Then she turned to face him, her golden eyes burning with emotion. "I do not want you to leave." "I don't want to leave either." "But you must," she whispered, "for your people, for peace." He swallowed hard. "And what about us?" Her breath caught. "Us." "Don't pretend you don't feel it too," he said. "I know you do." She closed her eyes, her hands trembling. "I feel it," she admitted, "more than I wish I did." "Then say it," he urged. "Say something real before I go." The air between them felt charged, alive. And then, finally, she whispered the words neither of them had dared to say. "I care for you, Eli Graves." It was not a declaration of love, not yet, but it was enough to make his chest ache and his knees feel weak. He stepped closer, his voice low. "I care for you too, more than I've ever cared for anything." Her breath trembled. "Then go, before I change my mind and keep you here forever." The next morning, Eli stood at the palace gates, ready to board a Terran shuttle that would take him back to Earth. His heart felt heavier than it ever had in his life. Tyrell stood before him in full ceremonial armor, her crown gleaming like the sun, but her eyes betrayed everything her face tried to hide. "Will I see you again?" she asked quietly. "You'd better," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I've still got to convince the galaxy you're not a terrifying monster. And I must convince my people you are not a reckless fool. Good luck with that. Good luck with yours." They stood there for one last heartbeat, two people from two worlds, held together by a connection neither language nor logic could explain. And then, slowly, she reached out and touched his cheek. "Do not die, Captain Graves," she whispered. "Not until I see you again." "I'll do my best." And then he was gone. The man who had made her laugh, who had challenged her, who had taught her how to feel again. That night Queen Tyrell stood alone in the garden where they had once walked hand in hand. The flowers still glowed softly. The water still shimmered. But everything felt different now, emptier, colder. Far above, human and Zethari ships moved into position, preparing for a war that neither of them wanted. And in the middle of that looming storm, two hearts ached across the stars, still bound by a fragile, impossible hope. And though they were apart, one truth remained. It was not the end. Not yet. War was closer than ever. Fleet movements lit up the galaxy, massive ships shifting into position, weapons charging, battle lines forming. On Earth, people whispered about the inevitable clash with the Zethari. On Zethar, the Council spoke of striking first before the humans grew stronger. And in the middle of it all, Captain Eli Graves and Queen Tyrell were separated by light years, but never far from each other's thoughts. On Earth, Eli sat in a dark room, surrounded by holographic maps and stern-faced admirals. They spoke of strategies, of fleets and firepower, of preemptive strikes, but he barely heard them. His mind was on a pair of golden eyes, a laugh that echoed in his chest, a touch that still lingered on his skin. "Captain Graves," said Admiral Harker sharply, "are you with us?" "Yeah," Eli said absently, "just thinking." "Well, stop thinking and start preparing," the Admiral snapped. "The Zethari fleet will be in range in less than a week. We need your intel." Eli swallowed hard. What if they don't attack? The room went silent. Then the Admiral scoffed. "They will, it's only a matter of time." "But what if," Eli pressed, "what if someone could stop this before it happens?" "Impossible," Harker said. "The Queen has made her choice." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then maybe it's time I make mine." Across the galaxy, Queen Tyrell stood alone in her private chamber, staring out at the stars. She looked every bit the ruler, poised, regal, unbreakable, but inside her heart was a storm. Her council was pressing for war. Her generals demanded blood. And yet, every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, that ridiculous human grin that had defied her threats, teased her fury, and somehow stolen her heart. "Fool," she whispered to the stars, "why did you have to make me care?" Her advisor entered quietly. "Your Majesty, the fleet is ready. All they await is your command." Tyrell turned away from the window. "And if I do not give it? They will question your rule." "They already do." "Then they will replace you." She closed her eyes. She had spent her life building this empire. But what good was power if it only led to destruction? What good was a crown if it meant losing the one thing she had come to care about more than the throne itself? "No orders yet," she said softly. "Tell them to stand by." 3 days later, Eli made the most reckless decision of his life. He stole a shuttle. No authorization, no support, just a single man, a small ship, and a desperate plan. The mission logs would later call it desertion. He called it hope. "Computer," he said as the ship slipped into hyperspace, "set course for Zethar." "Warning," the AI replied. "Entering enemy territory without clearances." Yeah, Eli muttered. "I know, just do it." Back on Zethar, chaos was erupting. A faction of the military had grown impatient. Without the Queen's command, they launched their own assault, small ships darting into human space, firing warning shots. Earth retaliated. Skirmishes flared along the border. It was only a matter of time before a single spark became a wildfire. And then Eli's stolen shuttle burst out of hyperspace, heading straight for the royal flagship. Unidentified vessel, this is the Zethari Imperial Fleet. You are entering restricted space. Yeah, I know, Eli said into the comm. Tell Tyrell it's her favorite idiot. There was a long pause. Then a familiar voice answered. Captain Graves, Tyrell said, calm but trembling, you should not be here. Good to hear you too, he replied. Permission to come aboard. You have no permission. Too bad, I'm coming anyway. The moment he stepped into the throne room, guards surrounded him with weapons drawn. He raised his hands casually. Easy, fellas, I'm just here to talk. The guards parted, and there she was, Queen Tyrell, standing tall and furious and heartbreakingly beautiful. You are insane, she said, striding toward him. Do you have any idea what they will do to you? Probably shoot me, he said, but I had to see you. Why? Because this is wrong, he said, his voice suddenly serious. All of it, the war, the hatred, it's not who we are. We are enemies, Eli. No, he said firmly. We're not. We're proof that enemies can become something more. Her breath caught. You should hate me. I tried, he said with a smile. Didn't stick. She stared at him, torn between anger and something far more dangerous. You risked your life coming here. I'd risk it again, he said softly, for you. Something inside her broke then, not her strength, not her power, but the walls she had built around her heart. She stepped closer, so close he could feel the warmth of her breath. Do you know what happens if I choose peace? She whispered. You change everything, he answered. And if I fail? Then we fail together. She let out a shaky breath. You are impossible. And you love that about me. A pause. Then, for the first time, she didn't deny it. Yes, she whispered, I do. And then she kissed him, a soft, trembling kiss that tasted of fear and hope and everything they weren't supposed to feel. It was the kind of kiss that could start wars or end them. When they finally parted, she turned to the waiting guards. Stand down, she commanded. No one fires another shot, not until I say so. Your Majesty, one of them stammered, but... Now... The guards obeyed. Across the fleet, weapons powered down. Across the galaxy, sensors reported sudden silence. And for the first time in centuries, the fires of war paused. Later, as they stood together by the viewing window, watching the stars burn quietly in the distance, Eli grinned. So, he said, what happens now? Now, Tyrell said softly, her fingers brushing his, we make the galaxy listen. And somewhere out there, beyond the fear, beyond the hate, hope flickered back to life. The galaxy held its breath. Across countless systems, weapons powered down. Battleships drifted in silence. Both Terran and Zethari forces watched their leaders, a human captain and an alien queen, standing side by side on the bridge of the royal flagship, rewriting the future with a single decision. No one had expected it, no one had believed it, and yet here they were. The woman who once promised humanity's destruction had called for peace. And the man who was supposed to fight her had stolen her heart. It started with a message. Queen Tyrell appeared before the galaxy via every broadcast system, her regal voice echoing through the stars. War has taken enough, she declared. It has burned worlds, destroyed families, and blinded us with fear. But fear is not strength. Strength is choosing something better. She glanced at Eli, who stood just behind her, hands clasped behind his back. I offer humanity a treaty, not as a conqueror seeking victory, but as a leader seeking hope. It was a speech that shook empires. Some cheered, some raged, but no one could ignore it. On Earth, political leaders scrambled to respond. On Zethar, the council erupted in fury. Yet in every corner of space, ordinary people, human and alien alike, whispered the same thing. Maybe peace is possible. The first days of negotiation were chaos. Earth sent envoys, suspicious, guarded, and very clearly armed. The Zethari Council tried to undermine Tyrell's authority at every turn. Every meeting was a battlefield of words and wills. And yet, in the quiet moments between the shouting and the politics, Eli and Tyrell found each other again. "You know," Eli said one evening, leaning against the balcony railing outside the negotiation chamber, "I think I've been insulted in 5 different languages today." Tyrell smirked. "Only 5, I expected at least 8. "Don't worry," he replied. "Tomorrow's another day." They laughed, a soft, genuine sound that felt strange in the middle of a galactic crisis. But it reminded them why they were fighting for this in the first place. Not just for peace, not just for their people, but for each other. Still, danger lurked beneath the surface. One night, Tyrell received a coded transmission from her intelligence officers. A faction within the Zethari military was planning a coup, an attempt to assassinate her and blame the humans, forcing the war to resume. "Of course," Eli muttered when she told him. "Can't have 1 week without someone trying to kill us." "It will happen during the signing," she said grimly. "They mean to end this before it begins." "Then we stop them," he said. "It is not that simple," she warned. "They are powerful, and if we fail—" "Then we fail together," Eli interrupted. "Remember." Her golden eyes softened. "You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish." "Why not both?" he said with a grin. The day of the treaty signing arrived. It was held aboard a neutral station between Earth and Zethar, a shining diplomatic hub surrounded by 1,000 warships, all waiting for a reason to fire. Inside the Grand Hall, tension crackled like electricity. Leaders from both species stood on opposite sides of a long ceremonial table. Cameras streamed every second across the galaxy, and at the center stood Tyrell and Eli, side by side, ready to change history. "This is it," Eli whispered. "No turning back now." "Then let us step forward," Tyrell replied. But just as she reached for the ceremonial pen, the lights flickered. A sharp hiss echoed through the chamber, and then chaos. Armed soldiers burst through the doors, weapons blazing. "Down!" Eli shouted, grabbing Tyrell and pulling her behind the table as plasma bolts scorched the walls. The room erupted into panic. Security forces engaged the assassins, but they were heavily armed and clearly prepared. One of them raised a rifle toward Tyrell, and Eli threw himself in front of her. The blast hit him square in the chest. "Eli!" she screamed, catching him before he hit the ground. The battle raged around them, but all she could see was his face, pale, eyes struggling to stay open. "Still smiling," he rasped, a faint grin tugging at his lips. "Do not speak," she pleaded. "Help is coming." "Did we do it?" he asked weakly. "Not yet," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "But we will, I promise you." She kissed his forehead gently, a silent vow. The fighting lasted only minutes, but it felt like an eternity. The assassins were subdued. The coup failed. And when the smoke cleared, the world watched as Queen Tyrell, her armor stained with Eli's blood, stood once more before the galaxy. "This is what fear brings," she said, voice trembling but strong. "It destroys everything we love. I will not allow it to win." With shaking hands, she signed the treaty. Across from her, Earth's ambassador, pale and stunned, did the same. The war was over. Days later, Eli awoke in a medical bay aboard the neutral station. The blast hadn't killed him, thanks to a borrowed Zethari shield patch and a stubborn refusal to die. The first thing he saw when he opened his eyes was Tyrell, sitting beside him, her hand wrapped around his. "You're awake," she whispered, relief flooding her voice. "Guess I'm hard to kill," he croaked. "Foolish human," she said, tears glistening. "You scared me." "Sorry," he said with a small smile, "but hey, we did it." "Yes," she murmured, "we did." She leaned closer and kissed him, this time with no hesitation, no fear. It was a kiss that spoke of everything they had endured and everything still ahead. When they finally pulled apart, Eli chuckled. "So, what now?" "Now," Tyrell said softly, "we build something new together." "Sounds like an adventure." "It will be." They sat in silence, watching the stars beyond the viewport, two souls who had once been enemies, now dreaming of a shared future. But far beyond those stars, in the darkness between galaxies, new threats stirred, new powers watched. And the universe, as always, had other plans. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And that was enough.